that audio? Hold on a second. Okay, so. Kind of hard to hear the game music when I have my headphones in. So, anyway, back to this, continuing with the beginning. The Phantom Village. The journey proceeds in silence, and you are lost in thought. You're exhausted and longing to see the deep blue Zanzibar sky again. You attempt to clean yourself up a little as you are heading out of the cave, but the boy's vomit has begun to congeal on your uniform, and it isn't coming off easily. From time to time, you look over at Lloyd, who is holding the boy's limp body over his shoulder. Finally, you reach the opening to the outside world. Your eyes are momentarily blinded by strong light as you try to make out the features of the surrounding landscape. Little by little, the scene recomposes and you are overwhelmed by the serenity of the atmosphere, in complete juxtaposition to the horrors experienced inside the cave. Suddenly, you hear movement in the thick jungle. All your rifles are instantly pointed in that direction. Saeed, increasingly alarmed, remains to the rear of the group. A white man in uniform rushes out to the bushes and, at the sight of all your rifles aimed and ready to fire, he suddenly drops to the ground in front of you. In a moment, he recovers himself somewhat, puts his trembling hands up above his head, and his lips slowly begin to move, stuttering each terrorized syllable. "Please, don't shoot." Recognizing his British uniform, you start to lower the barrel of your rifle. Lloyd, next to you, does the same, but Rogers reacts differently. "Do not lower your rifles. That is an order." Look at the lieutenant, who looks like a different person, striding uncharacteristically angrily towards the man on the ground. "What the hell are you here, soldier? Why the hell are you here, soldier? Give me your name and regiment. Now, speak up." Is this the guy who stole... This is the guy who stole the diary in the main game. I'm pretty sure that's the same portrait. "Important information from Captain Smith. I beg you, don't shoot." The stranger's voice breaks into terrified sobs as the lieutenant approaches him menacingly, resting the tip of his rifle barrel on the soldier's forehead. You have no choice, you must do something. "Lieutenant, he's from command." Your old friend turns to you, and in a few seconds, you see that strange and disturbing glare slowly fade and be replaced by his usual expression, as he begins to regain composure and awareness of his actions. "You're right, McLean. Forgive me, Private." He mumbles an apology to the wretched man as he lowers the barrel of his rifle. The lieutenant seems dazed, as if still not fully aware of his actions, so much so that he moves off and lets you continue the interrogation. You decide to take the initiative and try to get some information. Okay, you ask him how you got here. "Why'd you come alone?" The captain ordered you to bring us important information. "Alone? How are you supposed to make it without any sort of escort or protection?" You can't help but doubt the logic of this aspect of his sudden appearance, and his face flinches in fear. For what little you've seen of him, Smith hardly seems to be a reckless man, and it's odd, to say the least, that he would send one man alone to deliver an important message. "I'm good at going unnoticed." And squealing. Ignoring the scout's interruption, you let the stranger go on, all the while casting worried glances towards Lieutenant Rogers. It had been clear from the beginning of the mission that he was hiding something. Now whatever that something was, it seems to be devouring him from within. "The captain didn't want to attract attention from the savages. That's why I came alone." He seems to be telling the truth, and so you ask him to explain everything in more detail. You lower your rifles and allow him to get back onto his feet. He is young and clearly stunned by the reception he's receiving. Even Rogers follows you in lowering his rifle, but hesitantly, suspiciously, and without taking his eyes off the soldier for even a second. He tells you that he had been part of a reconnaissance mission sent out a few weeks earlier. He says that after their various exploits, the rest now finally gone back to command, but during the mission, they succeeded in finding the village where the savages are based. His description of them matches perfectly with what you've just seen in the cave. He continues that after a bloody and grueling clash, he and his regiment were able to kill most of the savages themselves, suffering few casualties. Smith's orders now are that Rogers and the rest of you head to that village on your way back to finish their work and eradicate the threat once and for all. Oh shoot, I clicked too fast. I was willing to bring you this message and take you to the village. You'll be needing a pair of eyes that know the area well. You can feel the rage building inside you. Only a few hours after you were sent out, Smith's orders have completely changed. What was supposed to be a reconnaissance mission only is suddenly real, full-on combat. You could scream, but just in time you feel a hand on your shoulder. It's Rogers, of course. Orders received, Private. We shall carry out Captain Smith's instructions right away. You've done well, Private. I apologize for having suspected you. Of course. Not at all, sir. One can never be too careful. You look bewildered at your old friend, as if he had just stabbed you in the back. Obviously, one does not simply disobey a direct order from the captain, but you didn't expect him to accept the command so cheerfully and willingly, especially not after your recent ordeal underground. Forward march. Let's get back on the path while there's still light. He smiles at you paternally. Before walking past and leading the way, Lloyd shrugs and follows him without hesitation. We're off to butcher more demon cannibals, McLean. Aren't you just thrilled? You are not. Not in the slightest. Only Saeed seems to share your reluctance. You decide to pick up your pace, passing both the interpreter and the scout, trying to reach Rogers, who is still intent on observing your new guide. James. Hi, Eric. Just like old times, eh? Superficially, the lieutenant is as composed as usual, but you have learned to read him better than that over the years. His joviality is too much. Forced, even. But you alone can see the distress bubbling away just under the surface. James, what are we doing? We are following orders, Eric. No more, no less. Just like we always do. The boy needs treatment. What do you plan to do with him while we're fighting the savages? Are we going to put him in the corner and let him watch? We do whatever is necessary to complete our mission. Wasn't last time enough for you? You grab his wrist, stopping him. Roger turns, and for a brief moment you wonder if the tension between you could really explode into something awful. And his mouth relaxes, and you can see the light of familiarity returning to his eyes. Eric, I know you're about to become a father, but that boy is not yours. You cannot allow your personal life to interfere with the responsibilities as a soldier. You let go, incredulous at his words. There is clearly enormous suffering drawn into the lines of his face, but right now, you can feel only anger towards him. You return to walking alone, pulling out your map. You soon begin to feel calmer, but then a voice behind you interrupts a hard-earned moment of solitude. You must go back, Effendi. His aspect is quite awful. His dark eyes are swollen on his pale, sweating face. You see that his body is visibly shaking with fear. He clearly hasn't recovered from the horrors he saw and experienced in the depths of the cave. We have no choice, Saeed. We are following orders. Effendi, you don't understand. They'll kill us all. We are cursed. I must return to my family. I know. You are not the only one. Saeed seems to have finally lost all sense of reality and starts ranting deliriously about the dreadful omens and terrible curses cast over the mission. You get to the village at dusk, although Roger signals the men to keep their rifles at ready as you are silently advancing. The place seems to be completely deserted. excuse me, yawning. Despite the beauty of the twilight's slanting golden rays and the calm which reigns in the village, there is a heavy atmosphere amongst the men. It is much too silent, too eerily serene. You can feel the prickle of goosebumps on your arms. The lieutenant looks at you and nods to indicate the center of the village and the various huts he wants you on reconnaissance. Lieutenant looks at you and nods to indicate the center of the village. Exterior. You and Lloyd look for clues at the outskirts of the village. The scout examines some clod of earth, then goes over to the huts. Squinting, he observes them closely, his chin lodged squarely between his fingers. Well, there certainly was a fight. The soil is drenched in blood all over the place. Bullet holes in the walls of the hut, British caliber. You're greatly surprised by the skills Lloyd is displaying. Having abandoned his usual irritating manner, he's almost like a different person. What about the bodies? You exchange a somber look, then you look up at the newcomer, who is currently moving stealthily from hut to hut. Let's see what he knows. At your questioning, the soldier goes suddenly pale and starts to shake. He seems to be about to faint, but then he regains enough to answer you at least. As the fighting went on, the savages started to throw themselves on their own dead comrades and began to eat them. They must have done the same to all the bodies. Even though words are difficult to believe, even though the words are difficult to believe, you can already begin to feel your nausea rising. Check the huts. You go into one of the huts with the young soldier. The interior is pretty bare. There are some pots, wooden containers, and some sort of primitive bedding, covered over with foul-smelling straw. There's no trace of the weapons that the savages used in the cave, and everything looks suspiciously tidy, as if it has been deliberately cleared up quite recently. You sure this is the right place? You ask the soldier, who is carefully examining a peculiar ceramic pot. Without question, this is the place we fought. Yet, it all looks so different now. You see the confusion in his face as his eyes dart around, looking for something to prove to himself that he has not lost his mind. You're about to move on to another hut when you see an unusual glint of reflected sunlight on the floor near the bed. You're moving forward to investigate when a sudden smashing sound makes you wheel around, rifle raised, ready to fire. Christ! The pot the soldier had been examining is lying in shards on the floor, scattered among various sized shapes of bones and skulls, and without any sort of medical training, that these are human remains. You're right. This is the right place. The macabre scene is repeated when you search the other huts. Each contains a few simple objects, a brushwood bed and baked clay pots filled with human remains. As you are coming to the last of the huts, you remember the strange reflection you saw in the first hut. When you go back to see what it was, however, there is no trace of it. Investigate the largest hut. You check out the main hut with Rogers. It is much larger than the other houses in the settlement, and there are even various sleeping areas scattered around its perimeter. Among some debris scattered on the floor, you immediately recognize an object. James. You pick it up and inspect it carefully before taking it over to show Rogers. It is a primitive dagger with geometric shapes carved into its wooden handle, and the blunted blade roughly fixed to the handle with a filthy black cord, identical to the one you saw in the cave. Perhaps we got lucky, Eric. It's quite possible that the men we killed in the cave were the survivors from this village. Excuse me. Obviously, you hope he's right. Your yearning for London is starting to become unbearable, and you really can't wait to be home. Okay, let's conclude. Finish exploring the village. You regroup at the village center to swap information. gathered from the search of the huts. It seems there's scant traces of the savages, and few clues found are insufficient to put together an idea of what became of them. It is starting to get dark, and it seems the lieutenant wants to stay here for the night, thus avoiding the jungle's innumerable dangers and potential attacks from any surviving savages. No one asks any objection to the idea. No one has any objection to the idea. Everyone is clearly exhausted by the events of the mission thus far. In the main hut, there is a space for all of us. We'll sleep there. We're heading back to base at first light. I suggest you all go and rest in preparation for our return trek. The child has regained consciousness, but looks drained. Rogers lays him down on the bed. He looks around warily, his tired eyes still full of fear. Then, after wriggling and groaning in pain for a few minutes, he closes his eyes and he falls asleep almost immediately. Before going to put together your makeshift bed with the others, you take a moment to sit with your diary near the central hut and take some notes in the moonlight. You hastily jot down details of recent events on the pages of your silent confessor. There's something about the whole situation that doesn't quite convince you. The cave savages were essentially bloodthirsty animals, yet the condition in which you found the village suggests an entirely different enemy, organized and intelligent. In addition, you are beginning to doubt the involvement of the Germans. It's too elaborate and perverse to be an attempt at upsetting British rule in Zanzibar. As you put your queries down on paper, they start to develop in a precise, orderly way. You begin to see connections that all seem to point in the same direction. The lieutenant's behavior, the actions of the enemy, and the new orders from the situation. What? Enemy new orders from Smith. Oh, sorry, I don't know why I read that situation. You keep seeing the same nasty possibility. Could there be an infiltrator? Ugh. Okay, I'm gonna say this right now. I think this set might be shorter just purely because I'm having trouble reading because I keep yawning and I'm honestly very sleepy. I was not expecting this. Rogers, you don't want to even suspect your old friend of such a betrayal. What motive could he possibly have? It would, however, explain his erratic behavior. What are you writing? You snap your diary closed, turn to the soldier and consider him warily. You had almost forgotten about him. I'm very sorry, I didn't wish to disturb you. I just needed a little fresh air. Okay, let's actually have a look ourselves what he wrote. Did I read this? Can't remember if I read this or not. I don't think I have read that. I think the last thing I read was Towards the Village. Yeah, I think this is the last thing I read. So, monsters in the cave. The surrounding jungle is eerily quiet this evening. I'm trying to make some sort of sense out of what happened today, but it all seems so absurd, as if we were trapped in a hellish nightmare. After following the directions we got at the village, we eventually found the opening to the cave hidden amongst the vegetation. What we saw in there, I'm not sure if I can even describe it. The savages we saw were like something from those lurid and fantastical penny dreadfuls they published back in London. Nor in battle have I ever seen anything like it. When you aim your rifle at an enemy soldier, you know for certain that he's afraid of dying, and of never returning to his loved ones. The soldier is exactly like you, in service of a higher power which is sending him to the slaughter, exploiting both his principles and his patriotism. You always know that, whatever happens, that soldier will have a moment's hesitation before killing you in cold blood. A millisecond of humanity. What we saw in that cave, though, had nothing whatsoever human about it. Lloyd Lloyd helping, we were able to rescue the child that the savages gripped by some terrible kind of blood frenzy. We're about to kill... Let's see, what? Lloyd helping, we were able to rescue the child that the savages gripped by some terrible kind of blood frenzy. We're about to kill. James had ordered us to wait and observe, but I shan't leave an innocent child in the clutches of those delirious savages. Merely because of an order. To hell with orders, to hell with the army, to hell with the Queen herself. I am not like my father. That McLean is long dead, and Rogers, above all, should know that. Suspicions. We got out of the cave. A soldier appeared suddenly, bringing us information about a new order from command. Apparently, the reconnaissance mission, reported missing a few weeks ago, has now finally returned to Stonetown. Stonetown. The man explained to us that he had been part of that team and that they had discovered the location of the Savages' village, fought them, and had finally succeeded in winning the ensuing bloody battle. Smith's orders are now clear. Finish off any survivors and completely destroy the enemy settlement. They must have been drunk back at headquarters. How could they have expected us, a tiny group of armed men and a civilian, to face an entire village of delirious savages? Nonetheless, James didn't flinch and ordered us to march, with the soldier showing us the way. It was a great relief to find the village completely abandoned once we reached our destination. We have decided to camp here for the night. Tomorrow morning we head to Stonetown. The boy is in bad shape. His temperature is rocketing, and he threw up violently as soon as we stepped out of the cave. Unfortunately, it went all over me and not Lloyd. In any case, he does need treatment, that's for certain, and I'll make sure he gets it the moment we get to Stonetown. I just hope he makes it through tonight. There's something escaping me, a bizarre presentiment that I can't get out of my head. The savages' behaviors here in the village is very different to what we observed in the cave. Those were like wild animals, incapable of higher level cognition. How could it have been possible for them to have cleared up the bodies of the fallen and respected knights after the previous battle in the village? Their actions seemed too complex, too organized for those beasts we encountered underground. Someone must be behind this, and I'm not particularly convinced it's the Germans. The fact of the savages abandoning the village so rapidly means they must have been tipped off. That's why they always seem to know our position. There must be a mole, but who? The new soldier? He appeared out of nowhere when we came out of the cave. Is it possible that he followed us all the way from Stonetown? Perhaps Captain Smith was right. Perhaps it is the German behind all this. What does the soldier have to do with it? And what would the Germans have to do with... What would the Germans have to do... What would the Germans have to do with a group of savages in the middle of the jungle? I feel as if there are what? Where I've somehow lost my place. I feel as if there are pieces missing from the jigsaw puzzle. Still, there must be more to this story, and I intend to find out what it is. Okay. Let's just stick with friendly, let's not tip him off. It's a journal, a way to relax, just like any other. Reach into a pocket for cigarettes. You feel the need to unload some of the tension you've accumulated over the course of the day. You should not overthink it. We weren't trained for this sort of thing. Who could have imagined that the British Army would run into into trouble against primitive savages. You saw them, didn't you? They were like wild animals. There was no way they could clean up a place like this. You think there's someone else behind it? You exhale upwards, creating a strange gray cloud around the room. What I think doesn't matter. I just want to get back home to my wife and child. The war is no longer any business of mine. You exhale upwards, creating a strange gray cloud around the moon. You think there's someone else behind it? Oh, am I accidentally clicking? I'm accidentally clicking backwards, that's why? What I think doesn't matter. I just want to get back home to my wife and child with no any business of mine. That sounds like a fine idea, McLean. You stub out your cigarette, get up, and head to the main hut to sleep. I didn't catch your name, Private. My name's Joe. Right. Good night, Joe. See you tomorrow. Oh my god. You hear the soft breathing of your comrade sleeping as you enter the main hut. Someone is snoring loudly, and although you don't know who it is, you'd put your money on Lloyd after you have arranged your bed. You put your money on Lloyd. After you arrange your bed, your table, and hide your journal in an inside pocket and lie back. Okay, I'm not sure what that sentence was. Am I just really tired right now? Yes, I am really tired, but am I reading that right? London is getting closer, and with it, your wife and child. Okay. Home sweet home. Already? Okay, I think I'm going to make this the last chapter just because I'm actually like falling asleep as I'm reading, so I'm clearly very, very, very tired here. Either way, home sweet home. Happy post-Halloween. I totally forgot to say that in yesterday's live stream. Slipped my mind. Okay. You are finally back in London, in the elegantly furnished living quarters of your house, decorated wall-to-wall with an astonishing array of beautifully yellow ancient maps and portalains. Zanzibar seems a distant memory to you now. The last few days have been arduous for both you and Elizabeth. She has been suffering from the terrible cramp of imminent delivery and been able to sleep. Now, from the adjacent room, you can hear the slightly muffled screams as you are waiting impotently in your favorite armchair. Your wife, always a lady of a certain composure, is now abandoning all restraint and is screeching like a caged animal. You get to your feet. You must get closer to stay by her side. Then, however, you recall the presence of the midwife, a large and fearsome woman with a ferocious look in her eyes. Sorry. I just want to see what happens. Let's enter. You push open the double doors and stop at the threshold of the room. There is your wife on the bed, her face shining with sweat and her screams filling the room. A doctor is there at the bedside, bent over her, doing all he can to alleviate her pain. The midwife notices you immediately and moves with a surprisingly rapidity towards you, her heavy footsteps audible above the sound of your wife's yelling. Mr. McLean, please, you must leave. The tone of her voice is deep, decisive, and authoritarian, typical of a woman used to doing this sort of job. You suppose that she must be used to reprimanding disobedient would-be fathers, perhaps even with force. She might even be more daunting than Captain Smith himself. Okay, concede defeat and stay outside the room. Ask for permission to enter. Enter the room. Let's ask for permission. I merely wish to see my wife and stay with her. You're trying to be friendly as possible, but the words come out awkwardly forced. Not that it's a problem faced with a powerful woman. Your wife cannot have distractions. The child is about to be born. Enter the room. I'll decide where I can or can't move. Stay, move aside. Oh my god, I was not expecting him to say it like that. The midwife seems shocked, as if you are the first person to ever speak back to her, as is likely the case. She is stunned for a moment before making way for you to enter the room. Then Elizabeth lets out another of her blood-curdling screams, and your attention turns to the bed. The midwife returns to her duties, and you approach the wife's bedside. You approach Elizabeth calmly, and quite unlike your usual self, in fact. You sit on the bed next to her and take her small hand in yours. At your touch, she turns to face you. She smiles, as she always smiled, at your embarrassment, at your inability to express any of your kindness, lying below your tough exterior shell. Then a grimace of intense pain flashes over her face, and the doctor rushes back to her side, followed closely by the midwife. Despite the incredibly tense atmosphere in the room, the doctor stays calm and collected. He orders your wife to push. The child is about to be born. The screams get louder as you are stroking your wife's hair and dabbing the sweat from her forehead. Her grip on your hand is gradually getting stronger. Her long, well-groomed nails start sinking into your flesh, and it takes all of your concentration to try and ignore the pain immediately. Then, it all happens in an instant. Her grip begins to relax. Her screams die down, to be slowly replaced by the baby's first cries. A slow shiver runs through your body, and the single fact is impressed upon your consciousness. You have just become a father. Finally, you will see your child's face. Hold him in your arms. Or, then again, perhaps it's a girl. Why not? You hadn't really thought about the possibility until now. You know that you have given far too much importance to importance so far in your life, both to work hard and what the hell am I reading? You know that you have given far too much importance so far in your life, both to your work and your duty to the crown. Now nothing matters to you more than being there for your baby. The sound you hear, however, are not the sounds of a baby crying. It is horribly distorted, like the agonizing cries of a dying creature, rising up from the depths of a distant cave. The look on the doctor's face is one of terror and dismay, and the midwife falls backwards to the ground in shock. She scrambles madly away on all fours. You move towards your wife and child, trying to understand what's happening. What was supposed to be your child is only a fractured image of its face is twisted and wrinkled, like a wet flannel being tightly wrung. There are pointed, irregular teeth protruding from its mouth, which appears to revolve paternally in their heart. Preternaturally in their heart. Wait, oh my god. Which appears to revolve preternaturally in their sockets, tracing out multiple simultaneous evil smiles on what should be its lips. Slimy tentacles start to creep, searchingly out of its tiny body, branching off at the navel. One of them darts towards the doctor's throat and is suffocating him before he can even raise his hands. A little giggle comes from the baby as the doctor's face turns deep carmine and saliva trickles from both edges of his mouth. In only seconds, he relents and his body falls limp, still held aloft by the monstrous limb. The horrendous and grotesque vision is accompanied by your wife's terrified screams, soon in chorus with those of the midwife. A second tentacle uncurls towards the midwife and twists around her ankle. Her fingernails scratch deep lines into the linoleum floor as it drags her inexorably towards its mouth. The midwife screams continuously for at least a minute while the malefic aberration consumes its first meal, tearing into her chest with vicious movements of a mouth incomprehensible to the rational human mind. It continues methodically. First it devours her tendons, next her muscles, and then finally her bones. Elizabeth whispers something in the faint, lifeless voice. The thing raises its eyes and stares at you, its face smeared all over with fresh blood. A smile is suddenly discernible on lips as it gurgles and stretches its tiny arms towards you. Just try to escape with Elizabeth, I guess. You pick up Elizabeth's almost lifeless body and carry her into the drawing room. The beast cries and shrieks behind you, reaching out its arms as it squeals ever more loudly, calling for his parents. Then the cries deepen to become roars, and from the bedroom emerges a mass of slithering tentacles. They look for and grab hold on the furniture and the chandeliers. As they travel forward, you can see small figures of a newborn babe at their center, now misshapen and warped, continuing to sprout more and more revolting appendages from every orifice. A tentacle makes contact with your shin and trips you. Elizabeth falls from your arms and rolls onto the carpet. You try to scream at her to get away from it while she can. I just want to see if you try to scream at her, get away, but your voice dies in your throat when the creature approaches you. Its rotating jaw emits a strange ticking sound. Okay. The tentacles continue writhing, bringing that tiny doll of flesh closer to your face, now convulsed with the shape of what looks like sprawling cables running beneath the skin. Its chubby fingers, one of the few remaining human dependencies, are gently caressing your nose. Then the creature roars mightily, and its appendages come flailing, thrashing towards you, all in synchrony. My baby! The demon freezes and shifts its eyes to your wife. She stands up and, in the shock and disorientation of the moment, stretches her pale arms out towards the stretcher. No, Elizabeth, no! You try to crawl towards her, but a tentacle returns you to the ground with incredible strength, and then you feel its cold tip enter your mouth and press insistently down until you're into your throat. The tiny body suspended among the tentacles moves over to Elizabeth. She smiles at it, her eyes streaming with uncomprehending tears. Everything's all right, my baby. Mommy's here now. The last thing you see is the diminutive monster biting savagely into your wife's chest, all the while gurgling happily and greedily. The slimy appendages in your mouth has found its way to your brain and is feeling around it. For a few seconds, as if by some alchemical fusion of neurons, you can feel every thought and sensation of the being. You feel its desperation and its rage towards you for having tried to escape, in its mind for your act of abandonment. But it's only a brief moment. The tentacles tightened only slightly and your thoughts become mush. You awaken with a start, sweat-soaked and confused. Your heart is racing and you try to slow your breathing. Your companions in the hut are sleeping peacefully, and there is still that mysterious snoring. But now you're quite sure that Lloyd is its source. You suddenly feel suffocated by an attack of claustrophobia. Despite its... What's that? Oh no, he has something. He has the marks on the back of his neck. Despite its relatively generous size, the hut feels cramped to you now. You get up and walk outside, trying to drive nightmarish images from your mind. Put a hand to an itch at the back of your neck and feel small holes there. Probably it's just mosquitoes. I'm just gonna wait for this to finish. Then you see it, torchlight, barely visible through the thick jungle. Then there comes a hypnotic ritual, chanting and sporadic, hushed calls. You realize with panic that it's the savages. It's an ambush. Okay. And with that, I'm going to end the set here. It is a shorter set, but I'm legitimately falling asleep while reading this. I mean, I'm kind of wondering, because there's a few pauses where, like, literally I was almost passing out. So I'm going to have to stop, because I'm clearly not in the right energy level to be reading this. I cannot believe I literally, oh my god, it's like I was seeing words as something else and then just dropping off in the middle of a sentence. Yikes. Okay, so either way, I should be back with this tomorrow, if not on Thursday. But thank you for liking if you liked. Thank you for commenting if you commented. Thank you for subscribing if you subscribed. Thank you for favoriting if you favorited. Thank you for simply clicking on this video. Until next time, guys. See ya!